Adapting a manga to an anime is tough. Sometimes you get greatness like Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and other times you get stuff like whatever the hell this was. Sometimes the adaptations can elevate the source material, like recently with Mob Psycho 100, and then there are other times where studios come out with whatever the hell The Promised Neverland or Tokyo Ghoul turned into. Both of which I don't think people really talk about anymore for good reasons. They're terrible. Trigun Stampede is a new telling of the story that serves as both a reboot and a prequel to the events of Trigun, and I am happy to say that Studio Orange have absolutely succeeded in creating an anime that, while still being different from the original manga and the 98 anime, manages to do its own thing and have everything that makes Trigun, Trigun. Before I get more into Stampede, I want to talk about the original Trigun and delve into what I like to appropriately call the scuffed Trigun timeline. Now, when I say the original Trigun, a lot of fans will think of the 98 anime, and I'm here to tell you that there is actually a manga that came out before the anime that is also surprisingly called Trigun. Now, the thing is, during the production of the 98 anime, the manga was not remotely close to being finished, so the anime creators did the only thing they could do at the time and created an original ending for the anime. After that, the author was able to finish Trigun, now known as Trigun Maximum, and finish the actual ending to the manga, which in my opinion is better than the original anime, although a little all over the place near the end, especially when fights are happening. Seriously, I have no clue what was going on during the fights, but the art was cool, so I mean, hey, it was pretty tight. This now brings us to Trigun Stampede, a reimagining of Trigun that does not directly follow the manga or the 98 anime, and instead does its own thing, serving as a prequel before the July incident that kickstarts both the manga and the 98 Trigun. Alright, now that I got you caught up, let's talk about Stampede. When the first episode of Trigun Stampede released, people didn't really know if it was a prequel, a reboot, or a direct adaptation. The only thing people really knew is that there would be design changes, and some people really did not like them. It was in one of the earlier episodes that they mentioned the City of July that Trigun fans knew what it really was. A prequel that also reimagines Trigun as a whole, and goddamn was this a genius idea. I really like Trigun as a whole, but both series before Stampede have their fair share of problems, and that's not saying that Stampede doesn't have a few problems, which I'll get into later, but to quickly summarize, the manga Trigun Maximum's pacing goes 0 to 100 and never stops for you to breathe, and some of the fights are so hard to follow, and the 98 anime, while being slower and an anime original and did an overall good job, it really dropped the ball with some characters, especially Knives, by turning him into this generic villain that is completely overshadowed by Legato. Trigun Stampede instead slows down the pacing overall from the manga, while also trimming a lot of fat from both of the previous iterations. Its characters and story are also more in line with the manga, which in my opinion overall is a plus. The original 98 anime is more of a mystery, as you know nothing about Vash during the beginning, while in Stampede and in the manga, it starts with the destruction of all of the ships that came crashing down to the planet No Man's Land, and starts with one of the bigger twists in the original anime. Now, this might come as a shock to some that have only seen the original anime, as they seem to spoil one of the bigger twists, but trust me when I say this, that is not even close to being the big moment in the overall story. Alongside pacing changes, another thing that Stampede does very well is give more of a backstory to all of the early villains. Since this is a prequel with rearranged events, you see some of the early villains such as the Nebraska family and Stampede's version of Monev the Gale, now named Rollo. While still being villains of the week, just like both previous Triguns, they actually have somewhat of a backstory in Stampede, with Rollo getting a completely new story since he's an entirely new character, which I much preferred over the original iteration of Monev, as he was always my least favorite of the gung-ho guns. I appreciate these changes, as when I watched and read the original Trigun, I really didn't care about the early villains at all, and Stampede's additions, especially with Rollo, made me respect the characters more. Oh, and how could I forget everyone's favorite character, E.G. the Mine? The biggest and by far the best change from the original anime is Stampede's version of Knives. This version of Knives is very similar to his manga counterpart and is genuinely a terrifying villain that you actually come to understand with his reasonings for why he is evil, unlike the original anime Knives, who was just bad for the sake of being bad since they didn't really dive into his backstory at all. With reimaginings like Stampede, you can come to expect changes to characters, but it's safe to say that the main characters in Stampede are still the same old characters that you love in both of the previous versions of Trigun. Wolfwood is still the same Wolfwood that we know and love, but instead has his backstory from the manga, which if you've read the manga, you already know why this is a great thing, because of one certain character. Unfortunately for the 98 fans out there, Millie is not in this version of Trigun, and is instead replaced by a reporter named Roberto De Niro. And no, I'm not making this up, that is 100% his name. Roberto serves as Meryl's boss and is a huge alcoholic, and I immediately fell in love with him. He's just this goofy drunk dude that wants to not be a part of anything, and he's just swept up in this crazy story that he absolutely should not be a part of, but it surprisingly works. Meryl is still Meryl, although in this story she's not the gunslinging Derringer Meryl that she is in both the previous Trigun series, and instead she's a reporter trying to find this humanoid typhoon causing great destruction everywhere he goes. That humanoid typhoon is obviously the main character himself, Vash the Stampede. I know some people prefer the 98 version of Vash for being a lot goofier, but rest assured this Vash is still goofy. He's just as more serious when he needs to be, just like his manga counterpart. Obviously, the biggest differences between the characters are the redesigns themselves. Overall, I think the redesigns are great, and I think they fit the new take of the story perfectly, although I do understand if people prefer the old designs, but I've seen some people just completely write off Stampede because of the redesign changes, which I think is pretty lame. When Trigun Stampede was originally announced and shown off to be CG, the internet went a little crazy and unfortunately seemed to have wrote off the show right away. Which, I mean, to be fair, I can't really blame them after the disastrous Berserk 2016 and the meme anime itself X-Arm. The thing is, this is Studio Orange, who have already proved themselves to being the best CG anime studio, and it's not even remotely close. If you don't know them, they made Land of the Lustrous, which is one of my favorite shows of all time, and the very popular Beastars, which looks incredible. Eventually, Stampede's first episode released, and it looked damn good. Stampede, while not being perfect, overall blew every previous CG anime out of the water, and in my opinion, generally looks better than a lot of 2D anime coming out. There are some shots like the attack in episode 3 and some scenes in the back half of the anime that probably would have been a nightmare to animate in 2D, that show off what you can do in a 3D space. From Vash gracefully dodging Gosef's rocket punches, to Meryl reacting to Vash's shenanigans, to even just subtle reactions that add a lot to certain scenes, Stampede absolutely nails character animations. Another thing that Stampede does really well is its soundtrack. I'm not kidding when I say that this is one of the best soundtracks I have ever heard come out from an anime that stands in my top 5 alongside Attack on Titan, Devilman Crybaby, Land of the Lustrous, and 86. The song that plays in episode 3, appropriately titled Millions Knives, is genuinely one of the best character themes I have ever heard watching an anime. Seriously, bravo to the composer, you absolutely popped off with this show. Between the overall fantastic animation and the story and character changes, there are some downsides to the overall show. Nothing too crazy, but I still need to bring it up. The biggest issue with Stampede suffers with pacing issues in the first half of the show. It's nothing too bad, but it constantly brings in new characters and jumps to new locations, and it is a little hard to follow how the characters get to where they're at, but after the halfway point, the pace slows down to a great speed and keeps that quality to the end. Now, as somebody that's read the manga and watched the original anime, it wasn't too bad for me, but I can see if you're brand new to Stampede, it will be a little confusing, but like I said, it does get better as the show goes on. Another minor complaint I have is that the animation can get a little rough when there are no-name characters on screen, as they clearly didn't spend too much time detailing them, but the good news is that the vast majority of this show looks fantastic. Other than that, I can't really think of any other downsides to the show, although I'm sure some viewers won't like the redesigns or the story changes, as obviously not everyone likes changes, but I seriously think that everyone should at least give the show a fair try, especially if you are a Trigun fan, as it is seriously setting up to be something truly incredible. I've seen way too many people writing the show off because it's not like the 98 anime, which was already different from the manga, and I've seen some really stupid takes from people saying that it isn't Trigun, which is weird because the original creator is praising the hell out of the show on his Twitter every single week. With that said, Trigun Stampede gets a 9 out of 10, and I don't think the show has ranked as high as Maximum for me yet, but with where it left off, I definitely think that Stampede is better than the original anime, and if they keep going as strong as they are with Season 2, or even more seasons, I can easily see this being the greatest version of Trigun, period. Thank you all for watching the video, and if you got this far, I seriously do appreciate it. I've never done a review like this before, so this is all new for me and a little awkward, but I had fun making the video, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. If you did enjoy it, please give the video a like and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys whenever I decide to make another video. Later.